Crystal Palace Football Club, a club that in the past 2 years has plunged from the top of the First Division into turmoil, with 5 different managers, 2 chairmen and mass unrest both on and off the field. We look back over these dramatic events and talk to the leading figures who were once part of the team of the 80s. In September 1979, they were top of the First Division, and they were labelled the team of the 80s. Now they're down in Division 2, and figures published this week show they've lost more fans than the rest of the London clubs put together. In fact, gates are down by 54% on last season. It's a bizarre story, as Alan Taylor now reports.
The problem with any billing such as Team of the 80s is that it may be strangely prophetic or merely serve as some kind of sad epitaph. And many would consider the latter to be now much more significant, considering the troubles at this club in recent times. Problems which have been highlighted by an amazing managerial turnover of no less than 5 in 13 months.
I've always said to the Palace players, you get knockbacks, these things happen, you've got to pick yourself up and you've got to start again, and that's what I'm going to do. And if I can, and that's my biggest disappointment, is leaving players that I've worked with for a long time.
I've got 6 months now, and I wouldn't sort of be silly enough to turn around and say, I'll get him out of keep him in the First Division. I
said to the chairman that I didn't want to sign a contract for 6 weeks. I wanted to see the whole scene, get it all clear in my own mind, and then if I wanted to take a contract and settle down, then I would do.
I mean, if we're talking about going into the Third Division before we kicked the ball into the Second Division, that's dismal thinking. That's, I mean, if I thought like that, then I ought to resign and get out of it.
Directors are fickle people, and if I did happen to have a disastrous start, obviously they might change their minds, but I'm well aware of that situation. I'll just enjoy it while I can and hope to make a success of it.
May 1979, and Palace clinched their return to the First Division after an absence of 6 years. A 2-0 win over Burnley means they're back as champions, an unforgettable night for over 51,000 fans. Terry Venables and his players had arrived in style.
We had basically a very young side. We was unfortunately called the team of the 80s, which, you know, looking back was a very unfortunate term to use. And they want success so badly, their supporters, and they were coming in their drones at that time, you know, 40s and 50s, and they've been very unsuccessful in the First Division since they've been in the First Division, and all of a sudden they were top of the First Division, and that was a great time at Crystal Palace.
It was a marvellous time for everyone. By September, the Liverpools and Manchester Uniteds were chasing the team of the 80s.
That's a goal by Walsh. It's Murphy swinging it in there. And headed off the line, Cannon's header. And Swindlehurst has put it in.
Things, however, then started to slip a little, and Palace eventually finished in 13th place, still a highly respectable position for such a young side. But it was at the start of the next season that the real turmoil got underway, with Palace only winning 1 of their first 10 matches.
Basically had a very young team of boys between 18, 19 and 20 years of age. They'd never been in a situation where they lost a few games on the trot, because they'd always been successful. They'd never been in a situation where they had pressure from the crowd, from the media, which, you know, when they had a bad run, having been top of the First Division, having been called the team of the 80s, they found themselves in that position. And it does affect people's play if you haven't been through that position before. You know, that is pressure at the highest level.
Those pressures took their toll amidst growing rumours of players' revolts. Suddenly, Terry Venables resigned after a stormy board meeting. The atmosphere was hostile.
After I'd said OK, once they agreed to compensation, I said OK, I'd go. 1 or 2 of the, well, 3 of the staff individually had come up and said that Mr. Bloyd said that we'd have to keep an eye on Terry because I think he's ill, which was the thing that really hurt me more than anything, because I've had a very good relationship with him, to be fair, over the years.
Venables and most of his backroom staff left within days, and to the present skipper Jim Cannon, that still seems to have been the most significant turning point.
Yeah, well, once he went, he more or less took all his coaches with him, right down to the physio. There's a lot of players went with him. I mean, that's no not having a sniper Terry Venables. I mean, that shows the loyalty that people had in him.
Attempts to find a successor were as embarrassing as they were unsuccessful. Graham Taylor and Howard Kendall were approached, but pressure from players meant the job was given to a self-confessed Mr. Nobody, reserve team coach Ernie Whalley.
The job I felt would be mine if I got the results. And at the start we got a couple of good results, but one swallow don't make a summer, you know.
He was a youth team coach when I came down here as a kid, so I've known him a long time. And we've called him many a name, because he doesn't muck about with you. And if you don't do it, you're straight out.
Well, he's hard-working, he's honest, he's experienced, and also he's waited 13 years for this, hasn't he?
Whalley may have waited 13 years, but he lasted just 3 weeks. A year ago this week, a familiar figure was sitting in the director's box. 48 hours later, Malcolm Allison was back in charge, but only on a 6-week trial.
I can see a lot in 6 weeks. I can know the people, I can feel the vibes of the people, I can see what's got to be done, I can see a lot in 6 weeks.
But after a month of disastrous results, fate determined Allison's future yet again, when Palace were drawn away to his former club Manchester City in the FA Cup. Palace lost 4-0, and that signalled the end of Allison's reign at Selhurst Park.
The day we arrived, of course, Malcolm left, and that was simply because I didn't feel that Malcolm and I could have a partnership. Subsequently, on comments that Malcolm's made on television, perhaps he's seeing his role slightly differently now. He's now in Portugal, and he sees his role more as a team coach, leaving the transfers and the players' wages negotiations to somebody else. Perhaps if he'd been feeling that way in January, we may have been able to get on.
Ron Nodes, the former Wimbledon chairman, had taken over following a bizarre series of denials, counter-denials and blatant U-turns.
All through all this time you had the situation of, you know, the club is going to be sold to Mr. So-and-so, or the club is going to be sold to Mr. X, Mr. Y. Every day in the papers it became a joke in that respect for Crystal Palace. Nobody seemed to know what was happening. Nobody seemed to know how long the manager was going to be there. You had the situation that, you know, the players didn't know whether they were coming in the morning to be coached by so-and-so, or whether Wimbledon was coming there as well to play the following Saturday, whether we was going to have rugby on the pitch on Sundays or whatever, which was all talked about. And it became such an unsettling situation.
Ray Bly says he still has his regrets, many regrets, about his involvement in that particular period, but he refused to take part in this programme. The new manager, Dario Gradi, came with the new regime, destined to become the fourth casualty when relegation came after defeats like this.
Here come Brighton again, flicked in again for Smith on the far side. Gary Williams floating a good cross in there. Price has got to get up to it, but it was Gregory, and in the end it was Smith! But Brighton still leading 1-0. Smith plays it in for Robinson across the goal there, no doubt about that one, Gregory. And here Robinson now. Plenty of support coming quickly out of defence here for Brighton. Gary Williams with the cross for them. And a flying header there!
When I got there, the place really was pretty disorganised. And I mean, the training facilities weren't run properly. And just things like training kit and training balls. So that the players hadn't really got any pride in the place, because they didn't know what was going on, and so they were completely demoralised. They'd also played for 4 managers, and that meant really that they didn't owe any allegiance to any one manager, and each manager had maybe forwarded the career of a group of players. For instance, with Ernie Whalley, different people got into the team and got better contracts. With Malcolm, different players again got into the team, and I mean, I had a player come to me and said, well, Malcolm promised me a big rise. He said, now he's gone, what's happened to my rise?
I feel that Dario had the cards stacked against him succeeding here, but that was something I felt after I'd made the appointment, some 2 months later. Perhaps I made a wrong appointment, asking Dario to take over. I think I was unfair on him because he has a lot of ability, and I don't think any manager with me at Wimbledon who came with me, I don't think would have succeeded at Palace through this recent period.
I made a mistake in the timing, I think. But the mistake really was that I didn't assess the political situation very well, in that I went there essentially with 4 people from the Wimbledon board. And really before I knew where I was, there was a 14-man board and 10 people there that didn't know me and I didn't know. And I'd really got to make a quick impression on them. And obviously I didn't. That was the mistake I made.
When Grady went last month, there was no permanent appointment. Instead, Steve Kember took over and saw how all the changes had affected morale.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, after 2 or 3 years, when they had, success like from the 3rd to the 2nd and up to the 1st and been heralded the side of the 80s, all of a sudden, people they've looked up to and respected over the years, who've brought them up, have disappeared from the club. Other sets of coaches have come in and told them to play different ways. And obviously, I think that was unsettling. And but I think now I've got a lot of respect for the players. I think I've got a bit of respect from them. And hopefully I'm going to try and get a family atmosphere back in their club again, which it's always been renowned for, and try and get the team spirit going again.
It all added up to the most remarkable upheaval at any club since the war. But the final chapter of this drama has yet to unfold. How great are the pressures just now on the club from, shall we say, outside sources? I'm thinking in particular of the investigation by VAT inspectors.
No pressures at all. Those situations are happening outside of the club. Only pressures, I would say, on us were to get some results on the pitch.
You must feel worried, though, about something like that.
Not really, because I'm not part of those, and nor is the present board. And, as I say, they're out of our control.
What is the present position, then?
I'm not aware of I don't know the present position.
Another factor, of course, and one that has been much publicised, is the fact that former manager Terry Venables is suing the club, and the club has threatened some counter-claim. What is happening about that?
You would have to ask our solicitors.
Did it surprise you that he took that action?
I really can't make any comment on that, because the action that Terry has made with regard to Crystal Palace all refers to a period prior to my arrival.
Mm. Nevertheless, I'm sure you would agree it's a rather unsavoury incident, one that could well have been done without, put it that way.
Yes, I think all these things, though, have to be cleared up. In order to get stability at this club, all of these things have to run their course. They have to be finalised so that we can get on with playing football.
Well, what do you think of Terry Venables' period at the club and what has happened since?
I think they had a brilliant youth policy, and at somewhere along the line, it was allowed to lapse and wasn't continued. The very good boys that came through are the nucleus of the first team that went into the First Division. If, in fact, there'd been backup, there's no reason why Palace now isn't sitting in the top 6 in the First Division.
Well, basically, I think that everything was right. We were on the right lines, but we did nothing but win. And I think the people at the club felt that we had a divine right to keep winning. And to go into the First Division, you have to hover about the bottom for a long while before you can push off from there to find out what the First Division's about. It's a different world. I mean, even Spurs, with the incredible talent they've got, this is the first time really this year that they've looked like challenging for the league championship, and you've got to be patient. And they felt that we were doing badly. We weren't doing as well as we'd done previous, but we were in a different type of opposition. We were playing against a lower opposition, of which we won handsomely. And then, because we struggled a little, they didn't understand that. And they just said, well, we've got to keep going, we've got to believe in these boys, and perhaps we've got to have 1 or 2 other players to come into the team. Now, that's where the backup should have come. The backup should have come from the top, not from the bottom.
The saddest aspect to this story is that Crystal Palace have such a vast potential support, a loyal support which would not have dwindled in recent times had affairs at the club been anything like normal. The supporters have been told frequently that what this club needs most of all is a period of stability. What this club needs most of all is a period of stability, and for someone to mean it.
And that special report by Alan Taylor.